Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to this very exciting video. I can't believe I'm actually filming this. So as you read correctly in the title of this video, it has been over a decade since I first, but also for the only time, ever read the Harry Potter books. I grew up with them, reading them, watching the movies, etc. But ever since then, I have only every year rewatched the movies, but never reread the books. I just haven't. I just didn't, because I mean, it's an entire series. Books 4 to 7 are also extremely thick. Rereading a series like that, it's a commitment. Let's just say it like that. So I never did it over the past couple of years. But as I just mentioned, every year I do rewatch the movies, and every year I ask myself, oh, maybe I should reread the books again. It's been so long, blah blah blah. But then I never did it until this very year. 2022 apparently was the charm, because for the first time in over a decade I picked up the books again. The kind of video I want to make about this now is that I want to compare basically the books to the movies, because given the nature of the fact that I have rewatched the movie so many times yet only read the books once, obviously the kind of like original blueprint I have of Harry Potter in my head is based on the movies, because I'm refreshing what I know via the movies every year, and that's kind of like the groundwork I have laid down in my head. Yet I am definitely not sure anymore what exactly was maybe different between the books and the movies, because it's been so long that I read them the first time. The versions of the first two books that I read this time around were these beautifully illustrated Mina Lima editions of the first and the second part. The Mina Lima design studio is the design studio that designed the entire Harry Potter franchise basically, and they came up with these beautifully illustrated versions of the first two books. They're also like pop-up elements in here. These are beautifully crafted. I'm very happy to own them. So far only the first and the second book have been made up in this style, so to say. As of yet, it is not officially like announced. It has not been confirmed whether they will continue making versions of these of the further books in the series, but I definitely should hope so. But so that played into the fact, to be honest, that I reread the Harry Potter books now, because I recently got these beautiful editions and I wanted to go through them knowing there would be like these cool pop-up elements in there as well. But I did not allow myself to just like skip through them, look at the things, but not reread the book, because I make my own rules in this house and I like to make my own life difficult for myself. So only now, as I was reading it, I allowed myself to also look at the book. I'm honestly so weird, but that's how I did it. So that also further motivated me to reread the books now, because I wanted to look at these beautiful books basically. Obviously, let's start with the first book. So once more, what I want to do now is compare the book and the movie adaptation and see in how far they are the same and how far they are different, because I just wanted to like check up on that again, because I definitely did not know it anymore in how far they are different or the same, because it's been so long that I first read these books. I do have my handy dandy advanced potion making notebook right here. By the way, I got this in the Mina Lima Design Studio shop in London. They have these in different cities. There's one in London, there's one in Osaka, I believe maybe like in New York, and in one like other random city. So there are a couple of their shops out there. Maybe one of them is near you. I can definitely recommend the one in London. It was really nice, and they have all kinds of props from the original movies there, and you can buy all sorts of merchandise. I had a grand old time there. Also left some money, but that lay in the nature of the fact. Anyway, overall, what I noticed when I reread the first book and rewatching the first movie, basically both book and movie are very, very similar. They are almost identical, but I actually do believe that the movie made some changes that even elevated the story in a sense. So I believe the movie not only did the book justice, it almost even made it better, if I dare say so. So basically, what are some of the differences I noticed? So scene-wise, there are almost no differences. Scene-wise, everything that happens in the book, one scene after the other, one chapter after the other, happens in the movie just the same. There might be some little extra information and background things that are happening in a scene that were cut out of the movie, but the things that were cut out I fully understood that they were cut out because they did not really help push the storyline further, or like they were like unnecessary repetitions of facts that we already knew about or stuff like that. And in that fact already, I believe that the movie did something better than the book almost, because as I was rereading this, at least like with the first book, it was more apparent with the first book, less so with the second. Currently, I am in the middle of the third book, and that's already like a different story, but definitely with the first book, I would say that as you read this, you can definitely tell it's a children's book, or it was written for children, at least this first book. And I mean this insofar as the scenes in this book are all very short. Whenever something is happening, it is almost like it's always resolved, like the action scene, whatever is going on basically, is resolved within like a couple of pages maximum, if not even like 1 or 2 pages. That's it. So what I noticed as I was rereading this basically is that I was surprised, comparing it to the blueprint of the movie in my head, that some of the scenes that in the movie are, well, just like longer, we get more details, we understand them better because we spend more time in a particular setting and like learning the nitty-gritty of everything that is going on. A lot of the scenes in here, they happen so super fast that we were already like moving past something that has just happened and something else was happening without having like fully digested or fully experienced the action that has just been taking place. So this fact that all the scenes in this book are very short, we actually do get quite little description of singular scenes or like world building in that sense. I definitely feel like that the movie did a better job of explaining these things, having you dwell longer in a single scene to fully understand what is going on, how the world is built. But again, because especially the first part was definitely written as a children's book, it makes sense. Children have shorter time spans than adults, so giving more or like much more information, stretching out scenes more, at least right here in the first book, probably wouldn't have made it all that suitable for children, or like for the audience it was written for. As I just said, definitely by the second book already that changes, scenes are longer, etc. And definitely by the time we arrive at the third book, which I'm reading right now, we have basically arrived at like scene length of the movie and scene length in the book are around the same. It almost feels like that some of the scenes that I'm reading right now in the third part drag on, so to say, longer than they do in the movie. Anyway, but like for the first part, that is definitely something that I noticed. Like the action, like because there's a ton of stuff happening in the first part, right? And the book, I mean, this looks really thick, but it is written in like a pretty large font. We have like illustrations around the borders of these singular pages. We have like pop-up elements in between. So basically the first book, it's not that long, yet so much happens in it. And so already, of course, you can tell that to cover all the action that takes place in the first book, and yet it is not even that long. Obviously, the singular scenes can't be that detailed because we gotta move the plot forwards in the only like 300 pages that we have. Obviously, we can already see a change in that in the later books of the series. From book 4 onwards, like books 4, 5, 6, 7, they are each about twice as big as any of the first 3 books. So obviously, at least from that point on forwards, it changes. Like we get way more, at least, I mean, I haven't yet reread the books, but judging from the size alone, you can already tell like from those books on forward, you get way more, well, detailed descriptions, world building, character development, etc. Because not only did, of course, the characters grow, not only are they growing up, but also, of course, the audience, the readership of the books was growing up alongside of these characters. So it made sense to maybe start off with a book that wasn't yet as detailed and didn't give the audience, the reader, as much information, but it definitely made up for that in the later books, I would say. But in that sense already, I noticed that the book and the movie are different from another, and I actually appreciated this about the movie, that it kind of helped, well, mediate this point, that it made certain scenes that are not that important like quite short and like moved on to the next one, but it also gave the important scenes more time and space than I guess the book necessarily did. Because, for example, the big ending battle scene, so to say, in the first book, once they go down the trapdoor to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone, that's like the big ending fight scene, the big dramatic battle of the first movie, right? Or like of the first story. In the book, that is like a tiny little chapter at the very end. Like I was almost already done with the book and we had still not gone down the chapter, and I was like, is this not the full book or what's going on here? So I was really surprised that this entire end battle scene of the first part, which in the movie takes up, I would say, at least a third of the entire story, is like a tiny little chapter in the book. And that, for example, I believe was way better executed in the movie, giving that a lot of space and time, seeing Harry, Hermione, and Ron go through the challenges they face once they go down the trapdoor and all of that. Because in the book there was I missed some detail. I was like, don't resolve this so far. So it was like the big traumatic moment at the end of the book. Give it more detail, give it more depth. And I believe the movie definitely did that. Whereas in the book, there was no time for it because we only had like 10 pages left basically until the book already ended. I also believe that the movie did a better job almost at establishing our trio of Harry, Hermione, and Ron as our main protagonist, as the trio of the entire series. Because in a lot of, like, okay, maybe not a lot of, but in some of the crucial scenes in the first book, this trio wasn't even like the protagonist of the scene. Because, for example, when they are sent into the Forbidden Forest as a part of detention, Ron isn't part of the group, because it was Neville that was also with them on some adventure when they got detention for being out at night or something like that. So it is Neville that has to go into the Dark Forest with them, and it's not Ron. And that, for example, I think is a change that is better, like the movie did it, making this scene about our three core characters and not having left one of them out and replaced him with, like, I mean, Neville is like an important side character, so to say, but obviously he's not as important as our main trio is. So that they used more chances to establish those three as friends, as this trio that goes through thick and thin together. I believe that was an aspect that the movie actually did better than the book. And now, almost importantly, at least for me, I believe that the movie almost did a better job at establishing, or like at making Hermione a better character. And when I say better, I mean more likable. Her having more agency, being more important in the development of the entire storyline, because I would claim that almost all of the key scenes in the first book, whenever they make like big discoveries that help like develop the storyline, that help them move along in their adventure, it is actually almost always Harry that like discovers something, comes up with an idea, etc. Whereas in the movie, obviously, Hermione is often the one that has the brilliant idea that makes them realize something, etc. And in that sense, I believe her character is given more importance through the movies because she becomes more of a central character in the development of the story. I think at least this sounds kind of like overdramatic, talking about the children's movie, but I believe the power dynamics of the trio are better balanced in the movie than in the book. Because as I just said, it is actually always Harry in the books that, well, pushes the plot along, that comes up with stuff, with ideas, figures stuff out. Whereas in the movie, I believe that's mainly Hermione's job. And obviously, I appreciate it that way because Hermione is my fave. Because who else would it be, right? Anyway, and then just like two little details that I was actually quite surprised by, because these are so iconic scenes that were shaped or like coined through the movie, but they were actually different in the book. First of all, the knitted woolen jumper that Ron receives from his mother for Christmas, the one with the R on front of it, in the book, the jumper doesn't have an R in the front. And that changes the entire jumper. It would not be iconic without the R on its front. So that's definitely a good detail that they added in the movie, I think. And also just like a little last quote that furthers the other point I just talked about, that Hermione is given more importance in the first, but this is now also already connecting to the second movie. In the books, it is Dumbledore that at the end of the first book in the hospital wing talks to Harry and says this iconic line of, "Fear of a name only increases fear of the thing itself," which of course we from the movies know and love as a very iconic line that Hermione gets to say in the second movie. So that was just, of course, something that struck me, that not only was she given this line instead of Dumbledore, but they also like swapped it from the first movie to the second movie. So these were the differences, let's say, I noticed between the first book and the first movie. As you just saw, this was less so focused on actual scenes that were different, because like 97% of the scenes were identical between the book and the movie, and it was more so, as I just said, the dynamics of the characters, etc., that I noticed a difference in. So moving on to the second book. Now, in the comparison of the second book and the movie, I noticed less differences as in the dynamics as in the first part, but I noticed a lot more differences in the actual scenes. But I don't know if you're actually asking yourself this question right now, but you should be asking right now, okay, which movie are you comparing this book to? What do I mean by that? I figured out, as I was in the process of preparing this video, I was shocked, honestly shocked, to figure out, because I hadn't thought about this before. I don't know, we have this pack of DVDs that we rewatch every year, so I never realized this, but apparently there are several different versions of the movies out there. And I didn't realize this before, because I, together with my mother, we are always rewatching the same movie, the same DVD each year. So when this year, I first watched our DVD together with my mother, then I read the book, and then I rewatched the movie, this time on Netflix though, I realized that the version of the second movie that is up on Netflix is different from the version that I have on DVD. That, believe me, that sent me down a fucking rabbit hole, because I was more or less freaking out, like, how are there scenes in this movie that I don't recognize? I have rewatched all the Harry Potters so many times that there's no chance that there are scenes in this movie that I don't know yet. It is not possible that all the, what I don't even know, what, 15 to 30 times that I have rewatched the second part, I have always blanked out during that one particular scene, and that's why I don't know it. I honestly experienced this moment of shock when I rewatched the second part on Netflix, because there were added scenes that I had never in my life seen before, and I was shocked. So doing research on that, like, why the fuck is there a different version of the movie that I thought I knew for all my life out on Netflix, sent me down this rabbit hole of, for the first time in my life, not only discovering all the deleted scenes of the movies, which I had also never watched before, because I believe on the like DVDs that we have, there are no extras on them. So I have actually never rewatched the officially deleted scenes. But mind you, I am not talking about deleted scenes. The differences I noted are not covered by these deleted scenes. I will get into that in a second. But so basically, first, as I was reading the book, rewatching this completely different, not completely different, but like this, let's say, extended version of the movie that is up there on Netflix, I noted down the differences I discovered in between those, but then I found out about the entire deleted scene section, so I will get into that separately. Okay, I will first tell you about the differences I noticed comparing it to the movie that I thought I knew, and only then later I realized that some of the things I thought I had noticed are made irrelevant, so to say, because they are actually covered in the deleted scenes. God, it suddenly got very confusing and very complicated. Honestly, it is shit like that that keeps me up at night. Like, have I or have I not seen all the scenes out of the Harry Potter movies? I used to be sure about the answer to this question, and now I'm not anymore, and that is worrying me. Anyway, so as I just said, basically between the second book and the second movie, there are less differences as in like the character dynamics and stuff like that, but there are a couple of differences in the scenes that we witness. Similar to the first movie, the second movie also cuts out some redundant, unnecessary scenes that we still get to experience in the book. For example, in the book, Harry is spending like an entire month at the Burrow, at like Ron's childhood home, and living with them in the summer, whereas in the movie, of course, he seems to be only spending one night there, so to say, before they head back to Hogwarts. So it is stuff like that that the movie obviously like cut up, shortened. An important fact that we learn in the book is that when Harry uses flu powder for the first time in his life and he ends up in Nocturne Alley instead of Diagon Alley, we learn in the book that the shop he lands in is actually Borgin and Burke's. And that is important as a reader, I would say, because Borgin and Burke's, if you're familiar with the entire franchise, you know, will play an important part in the later parts of the series again. So reading that part in the book, I was quite pleased to realize how J.K. Rowling, from like the very first parts in the series, was already like setting up connections into the further novels of the series. So that's, for example, a detail we get in the book that we don't get in the movie, at least not. Let's just call it maybe the cinema version, because I'm fairly certain that the version of the movie that I have on DVD is the cinema version. Now, I couldn't speak on this per se because I never watched the second part in the cinemas. Actually, fun fact, the first part that I personally watched in cinemas was the sixth part, because only when the sixth part dropped, I was 11 when the sixth part dropped. And when you're 11 and you come with like a parent or a guardian, I was allowed to watch the movie, even though actually you had to be 12 to go see the movie. But because I was with my mother, it was okay. But so all the other movies, I never watched them, like the Prime movies 1 to 5, I never watched them in the cinema. So that's why it's even more hard to now kind of like compare, okay, what is like the cinema version of the movie? Is it the same or is it different to the DVD version? The DVD version is not the same though as the Blu-ray version. Then there's a version that they show on television when they air it. Then there's like the director's cut, then there's the final cut, then there's the extended cut. You see, that's what I mean when I said this shit keeps me up at night. Anyway, another scene that I was very happy to see it being edited out in the movie, or like not edited out, but they just changed the entire scene at Diagon Alley when the Weasleys and the Malfoys basically clash at the bookstore. The scene in the book ends up with Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy physically fighting. They actually get into a brawl, and I thought that was so out of character for both of the characters. Like neither Mr. Weasley nor Lucius Malfoy would ever get into like a physical fight, obviously like for different reasons, but that was so out of character for both of them that I felt really weird about that sequence in the book, and was quite happy that was not translated into the movies, that they changed that scene, because I love that scene in the second part. Also how Malfoy at the end of the scene like raises his eyebrows at Harry and Ron. It's hilarious. I don't know. So I was really glad to see that they had changed that in the movies, and I think it is way better in the movie because, as I just said, having them physically fight doesn't make any sense. A scene of the movie that is so iconic but does not actually happen in the book is the flying car viaduct scene. You know, when Harry and Ron are in the flying car trying to find the Hogwarts Express to follow it to Hogwarts, we have this iconic scene where they're like flying on the viaduct and they hear the train and they're like, oh my gosh, we must be getting close. And then they realize it's like right behind them and everything goes topsy-turvy. It is one of the key scenes of the second movie, I would say. This scene does not happen in the book. They only they look for the train and they find it. And that scene in the book, it almost drags on for a bit because it takes like hours for them to like reach Hogwarts and they're really tired and etc. by the end of it. So yeah, that was just like a very important difference, I would say, because here apparently they added something in the movie that was not in the original book, but it was like a very vital scene that they added that I do believe is definitely like an audience favorite. Another scene that, on the other hand, is unfortunately not in the movie, I believe that would have been a really good time, is there is a Valentine's Day scene that is majorly influenced by Professor Lockhart in the books, and I believe that would have been a very good time. Like in general, Professor Lockhart gets more screen time in the books than he does in the movies, and I would have actually liked to see that in the movies because Professor Lockhart, come on, he must be like the most hilarious person in the second book, and I would have actually loved to see this scene translated into the movie as well, but alas, it didn't. So you see, there are quite a few scenes that either, for example, were in the book but not in the movie, or were in the movie but not in the book. But some of the differences I noticed are made irrelevant if you watch at the deleted scenes, because some of these scenes were actually filmed but then cut out of the movie, but you can still see them in like the deleted scenes. For example, this entire sequence at the beginning of the book that I told you about, that Harry lands in the Bug and Book shop and also like witnesses the Malfoys coming in. That's quite a long scene in the book that is cut out of the cinema version of the movie, but there is like a 2 to 3 minute long clip in the deleted scenes that covers this entire scene. There's an hilarious scene, I wish I would have let that in a movie, in which Lockhart, that is also in the original books, Lockhart makes him take an exam that is entirely about himself, as in like, what is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color, blah, blah, blah. And that was like such a funny, that was not only a funny scene in the book, but I also watched like the movie adaptation on it in the deleted scenes, and that was really funny. I wish I would have left it in there, but alas. An important scene that is like that in the book but was cut out, and I think it was cut out for the better, is when Harry and Ron enter the Dark Forest to go and find Aragog. There's a scene that once they have not yet reached the Hollow and all the spiders, they already spot the car, the flying car in the distance. And I was so glad that that was cut out of the movie, because that takes away from the entire suspense afterwards when they get rescued by the car from the spiders in the Hollow. Because in the movie now, the way that it at least is in the cinema version, the car kind of appears as a deus ex machina and suddenly saves them when they're like in the greatest peril. But with having the scene beforehand of them already like seeing the car, it doesn't come as that big of a surprise anymore. So I was actually glad that they cut that out. These are like all the official deleted scenes that you can find on YouTube, but they do not cover the differences I noticed between the DVD version and the version on Netflix. But there's the DVD version, there's the version on Netflix with special extra shots in scenes, and then there are all the deleted scenes. Like the Netflix version does not have any of these deleted scenes in them, but the things that I noted in the Netflix version that's different from what I know from the DVD version is still in the same scene. Once they have escaped from the spiders in the car, there's this moment when they have just kind of like driven out of the Hollow, and Ron and Harry are staring at one another kind of like in shock, and then they're looking at the mount and they see all the spiders coming over the mount. That's what the scene is like in the cinema version. On Netflix though, they added yet another spider attack. So while they're in the car looking at the mount, suddenly there's like a spider coming from the side and like through the window, taking Ron's neck in between his pincers, and Harry has to once more use the Aranya Exuma spell to like get rid of it. That scene, like, first of all, I believe it was probably cut from the cinema version because it is quite a scary scene, and I mean, he almost has his head chopped off. I mean, that's not really children friendly, right? So not only is that scene per se kind of like scary, also there's like this shock factor because this spider suddenly comes out of nowhere. I was so freaking shocked when I saw that scene, because that was the first scene I noticed in the movie that was different from the movie that I have known for all my life. I was so shocked when that suddenly happened. Like, what is going on? It felt like my entire reality was crumbling before my eyes, because I thought I was watching the movie that I had watched about like 20 to 30 times in my life, and suddenly was different. You can't believe maybe the shock. So that is a sequence in the Netflix movie that is not like that in my DVD version, that I believe to be the same as the cinema version. And it was probably cut out of the cinema because it was a bit too, well, not children friendly, I guess. But again, this special attack scene is not covered in the deleted scenes. So this is not a deleted scene. It's just like an extra added sequence that is in some versions of the movie out there, but not in others. For example, the version of the movie that's on Amazon Prime, I don't know, does it have the scene in it or not? I don't know how many different versions of the same movie are out there, and it's driving me fucking crazy. Another scene that I actually wanted to like talk about, being like, oh yeah, that's quite a big difference between the book and the movie, because I always wondered watching the movie what that part of the story, what that detail was about, because it's not covered in the movie, but now I know the answer because I reread the book. Well, it is covered in the extended version of the movie on Netflix. The scene that I'm talking about is once the second writing on the wall, the second message has been left by the heir of Slytherin, and Harry and Ron overhear the teachers talking about how Ginny Weasley was abducted by the monster into the Chamber of Secrets. In the version of the movie on my DVD, we do not see the second writing of the wall. There's like one shot, I will try to find it and like put it on the frame right here, where you see like the last two words basically of what is written on the wall, but then the camera pans over to the teachers and like to Harry and Ron, and it never pans back. In my version of the movie, we never like see what the second writing on the wall is. So whenever we rewatch that movie, when that scene came up, because I couldn't remember anymore from the books what it said, I always wondered like, I wonder what it says on the wall. I read the book and it is written in the book what it says. And again, maybe it was too graphic and that's why it was cut out of the cinema version. But in the extended version on Netflix, the camera actually does pan back. And like after Ron and Harry hear how Ginny has been abducted, we see the writing on the wall and it says, her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever, or something like that. So again, quite gory, especially because it's written in blood. So once again, I think that probably that like still frame, almost, because it's hardly more than a still frame, was cut out of the cinema version because they had to cut it out, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed children 12 years and older to see the movie. I don't even know. That again was quite a big difference. I thought like, oh my gosh, finally I know again what it says on the wall because I reread the books. Well, you know, in some versions of the movie, you do see what is written on the wall. Anyways, and then last but not least, once we reach the big showdown at the end of the movie, when Harry is fighting the basilisk, there is an added scene between Harry and the basilisk in the extended version of the movie that is not on my DVD, in which Harry, like the basilisk is like right next to Harry basically, and there's actually no place for him to escape, but because the basilisk is already blinded by then, he can't see him, and then Harry picks up a stone and like throws it somewhere else, so the basilisk is distracted and goes away again. That's also like a scene that is not in my original version of the movie, as I always rewatch it, so yet another difference. So basically, if you add all the deleted scenes to, well, whichever version of the movie you are already watching out there, the book and the movie are like 99.2% the same, I would say. If you take out all of these deleted scenes, then there are quite a few differences, but like still not a lot. I would say that the second book and the second movie are even closer maybe than the first book and the first movie, because especially like this factor of the power or like the dynamics in general between the characters, that was translated quite well between the book and the movie, because it's not that different from one another anymore. But yeah, I was so shocked because that second book, that second movie, it made me realize how many different versions of this movie are out there, all these extra extended cuts and everything, all these deleted scenes that I have never before seen in my life, and I thought I knew everything about Harry Potter, and then suddenly I realized that. Anyway, but I think I found out that these special extended whatever cuts only exist for the first and second movie. If they exist for the other movies, they have either like not yet been released or whatever, but I found a few like blog posts, etc. that said this, that like these extended cuts, whatever, only exist for the first and second movie, which honestly is somewhat of a relief to me, because right now, as I said, I am rereading the third book and rewatching the third movie on Netflix. And if I noticed even more differences between like these different versions all going around the internet, I might actually go crazy. So anyway, guys, that was a very long video, but obviously I wanted to give this a proper space and time to talk about all the differences that I noticed between the books and the movies. As I already said, I am actually continuing the series now. I could make third parts like this on the other movies, like for example the second part being on book 3 and 4, and then like maybe the last part being on book 5, 6, and 7 or something like that. I don't know. So like if you like this video, let me know if you want to see videos like this for the other books. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe this inspired you to reread the books, rewatch the movies. Let me know if the version of the movie that you always rewatch includes any of the deleted scenes or any of these added sequences. If you're also hella confused about all these different versions of the same movie, but do me a favor and don't go as crazy about it as I did. One of us is enough, I guess. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a good day, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!